Good evening. Please join me in a prayer and a pledge. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, deliver us from evil. Amen. And the evil right now is this coronavirus, if you haven't noticed. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May we have the council member roll call, please?
Mr. Powell,
Here.
Mr. Gertz,
He's on mute.
oh, okay, I think he's here though. Mr. Lynn,
Here.
Mr. Albrecht,
Here.
Mr. Lindeman,
Here.
Mr. Fischescher,
Here.
Mrs. Edichico.
Here. Here.
Here we are now. Did I get it right?
Yeah.
You got it.
Okay. All are here. We have no minutes to approve this week. I probably didn't send them back out again. I'll do my better for the next 2 weeks here. Audience participation. Did we get any correspondence? No, not this week. Okay, then we will go to any communications. No communications. Council committee reports. Finance Chairman, Mr. Gertz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was looking over all the accounts and funds that we have that was provided by the auditor recently. I'm examining that we have the stadium fund, and I had some casual conversation the other day with Mr. Lindeman. There's $111,000 in that particular fund. There is a stadium fund also for the track improvement, but I believe these monies have been put into the stadium fund. Really, most of the expenses that we incur are coming out of the general fund, actually. So I anticipate that maybe after I don't know how I'm going to do a meeting without public notice with Mr. Fischescher and Mr. Lindeman, but I anticipate that we'll transfer probably a good bit, if not the most of the money out of the stadium fund into the general fund. I'm not going to steal anyone's thunder. We have been having bi-weekly meetings now with certain members of the finance, auditor, chairman, the treasurer, law director, and the safety service director about the possibility of securing financing. As you're all well aware, we passed that legislation to at least authorize the investigation of that possibility. But if we can move some funds monies out of some funds into the general fund, I think it would behoove us to consider that before we incur any debt. As I looked over the document here of the various funds, I'm glad to say, and I'm not going to steal anybody's thunder, although I don't think the service director is here tonight on our meeting. But we did receive a check from the Bureau of Workmen's Compensation, which is going to help dramatically, at least towards one of the payrolls, I believe. We also are anticipating a payment from the Metropolitan Sewer District for easements that we are granting them relative to an expansion of storm sewer in the city of Reading. And looking over the sewer service fee fund, currently the balance is $562,000. And adding those monies up from Workman's Comp, the Metropolitan Sewer District, the Stadium Fund, and approximately $560,000 from the Sewer Service Fee Fund, hopefully it'll make up. I think it will be reported later. I'm not going to, again, go into it. I think I'll leave it up to the treasurer and the auditor. But we are going to experience, at least temporarily, and hopefully not permanently, a difference in income through the earnings tax and so forth. Now, as most of you are aware, the earning tax has been kicked over to not be required to be filed till July the 15th. So we don't know where we stand on all of those issues, but those, what I mentioned, add up to $973,000. So I hope that we can explore that before we go ahead and borrow any money with that. And if we hold our own, we may not be in as bad a financial shape as we were worried about. I hope that's the case. We don't know that yet. So we'll look at that and wait towards the auditor and the treasurer to make their report. One other fund that we have money in, the FEMA fund has $67,000 balance. There's money in there from various grants, and I discussed this with the law director. That would be my intention to establish a different and separate fund for grants, such as the ones that have come through from Duke and so forth, for various possible improvements, parks and so forth. But I think they should be allotted into a separate fund itself. FEMA is a federal emergency management account. I don't think they belong there. I don't know. I'm sure that was a direction of the safety service director, but nevertheless, we will look at that. And I would like to look at that any kind of monies that are spent out of any funds, all should be required to be maintained and properly appropriated. Just because we get a grant doesn't mean that anyone has the arbitrary right just to spend it. I think the council should have a say as to an appropriation. We might get a grant that some of us don't agree with, and we would have no say if we just look at this in an arbitrary way. I don't have any other comments other than just to, I haven't talked to the service director, but we, as you all are well aware, we did borrow into the Streets and Curbs Fund a substantial amount of money for the approximately $1 million that the city has spent for ingress and egress and road improvements for the new school. So I think the city has made a fair and proper contribution toward a new school and the construction of it. We worked in an appropriate way in supporting that. But I don't know what the payment schedule is. We did issue bonds for that. I think the bonds were actually higher than what we anticipated spending. I wish we had did a bond anticipation note, but that's water over the dam. So anyway, we'll continue to look at the finances and keep working with the auditor and the treasurer and administration and council members in hopes of meeting all our responsibilities and get us through these troubling times. That's all I have. I would like to speak to my ordinance later in the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, anyone have any questions for Mr. Gertz? Don't see no raised hands. Thank you, Mr. Gertz. Where are we? Utilities, Lands and Buildings Chairman, Mr. Lindeman.
Thank you, Chris. For 2019, we diverted over 388 tons for recycling, which was 8.44% diversification rate for 2019. And I believe that this is the first year that I've seen anything over 5%. So 8.44%. We're moving in the right direction, which resulted in a check for $3,720.06 that we can use for recycling measures. So recycling containers down at the parks, or try to promote more people to recycle in the literature. But that's very heartening. I appreciate that. We have 832 curbside recyclers now in Reading, and hopefully a goal here for me would be to have 1,000 by the end of the year. I think that's very achievable. It's a steady pace. You know, people sign up for whatever reason. They get the word and they see the benefit, and maybe they just get tired of taking their recycling down by the stadium. I don't know, but that's all good news. Try to recycle your cardboard, paper, glass, plastic, aluminum, tin cans are the main things. Just keep up the good work. That's all I have at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lindeman. Zoning, Planning, and Environment Chairman, Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Chris. Got a couple of things going on, looking into for zoning, so I hope to be able to report about them in the coming weeks. The big thing, I have a question dealing with environment type stuff. Does anybody else have an issue or notice that when they throw out the grocery ads every week, that a lot of times they're not making them out of the street And then like in a case like this where they, threw them out and then you hit a heavy rain, how many of those are being washed into the gutter? So I think that might be something we need to look into. Back in the day when it was the door store, it would actually, be hooked on the doorknobs and stuff. Now they literally drive a car down the middle of the street and just toss them out willy-nilly. And a lot of times they don't even make it onto the properties out of the street. So I think that is something that probably needs to be looked at. Has anybody else had that experience?
Yes,
Well,
absolutely, Dave.
I think everybody
Yes.
has. I think this has been looked into at one time. Does anybody remember the outcome of that? I thought maybe Mr. Ross had looked into it.
I believe there's a number somewhere on the literature or on the bag that you can call to make complaint, but I'm not positive about that.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'll pay attention and, is that out of our domain to call it, or
I
is that
wouldn't-
something that
I
needs to be
wouldn't-
deferred to Patrick?
I don't think that's a city thing at all.
Okay,
So,
Yeah, it is. It's litter.
yeah, okay.
Sure.
It's a city concern, but it's not a city program. And I think
Yeah,
that's
right.
what Dave was talking about. Is it a city program? That's not. So
There's certainly laws concerning solicitation. You can't just go around the city without first contacting the police department if you're going to be knocking on doors, of course. But I do think that there's probably legislation out there that would control this. Off the top of my head, I don't remember specifics, but it wouldn't hurt to have laws and contracts to look into it, maybe.
yeah, you might want to start with Patrick, Katie, and see
Yeah.
if there's been something in the past.
that was all I had this evening, Chris.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Powell. Any questions for Mr. Powell? I don't see any. Laws and contracts, Chairman, Miss Edichico.
No report at this time.
Okay,
Thanks, Chris.
any questions? No questions. Public Health and Safety, Chairman, Mr. Fishesher.
Thank you, Chris. Earlier the last week, I was able to meet with Chief Edens. Besides offering my committee support and assistance, we're able to review the department's capital expenses and a few other concerns. He has not heard from Ford regarding a time frame for the delivery of the cruisers. He did tell me that they are definitely in need of these vehicles as soon as possible. Currently, they have no backup vehicles for which they have to take someone off the road for any type of repair or maintenance on those vehicles. The oldest cruisers are also starting to show extended wear and tear, such as coolant leaks and other problems. So as soon as we get the word on delivery date, I will prepare an ordinance and have the units changed over and lettered, to have the units changed over and lettered. Administration and the police department are working on resuming court sessions within the next couple of weeks if all the logistics can be worked out. The sessions will probably be held at the field house. I thought possibly Dave was going to be here tonight to add a little bit to this.
He's on now.
Oh, he is? Okay. Well, I'll let him explain anything more if he'd like to do that. The fire department is wrapping up the servicing of hydrants around the city. Just a reminder is wind things down that if your water becomes cloudy, run cold water in the tub or shower, and this should clear it within a few seconds. I will be sending out 2 ordinances within the next week for the 2 planned capital purchases out of the Fire EMS Capital Fund. The first is for the Lucas chest compression device that applies a more constant CPR compression. is safer for personnel during transport and frees up a member to perform other tasks on the scene of a cardiac arrest. Estimated cost for this piece of equipment is $12,000. The other purchase is $8,500 for MDC equipment that will replace obsolete 800 megahertz equipment that will be going offline the end of June. This is actually less than expected by about $3,500. And the last thing I have, Chris, is that Jenny Morgan has scheduled a community blood drive for Thursday, May 21st at the Reading Community School in the cafeteria. Times are from 1 to 2:45, and then again from 4 to 7. To schedule an appointment, you're to call Hawksworth at 513-451-0910, and appointments are encouraged. And that's all I have.
Question, Randy.
Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah.
Has there been any updates on what it's going to take to outfit the new cruisers? I know, I guess some of the equipment, the changeover wasn't going to be able to change over everything.
We won't be able to schedule that, Dave, until we get the cruisers in. Cost wise, it's about $1,600 for all 3 cruisers.
Okay.
That's for changeover and lettering.
Mr. Lindeman?
Randy, did you have any talks with the chiefs about reducing their budget?
I do know that staffing is on hold. So the police, I believe they're going to have lieutenant test in June, I believe is when that's coming up, but they will not be testing to replace what is basically Scott, Chief Snow. They will not be hiring a patrolman for that. The fire department is holding off on their 3-man hire until after this is over.
Thank you.
I had a question, Randy.
Go ahead, Mr.
Yes.
I was curious, what's the status on that crosswalk at the library of the, were they going to put up some kind of temporary stanchions or?
I've got information on that. I talked to Patrick about it a while back after you had brought it up. He got in touch with who was it, Madera, that has the flashing lights and everything. I do have their ordinance now. Right now I'm on hold with it because I want to talk to the committee about it until we can have a committee meeting and we get out of this slump. You know, I'm on hold with it basically.
I thought temporary. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know what you mean by temporary. We've already got flashing lights down there.
Well, I think they were going to put some kind of not a guardrail, but those things that I don't know what they even call them. They're like they mount in the road and they kind of give you a added advice to move away so you don't come towards the cutout.
Yeah, I think yeah, you're talking on where the jut out comes.
Yeah,
they're going to be doing that when they get out to start painting. They're going to do some changes down there, but they can't fire, or they don't want to fire up the paint sprayer just for that one area. They're going to do that when they start painting the rest of the roads.
well, not strictly about painting. I was talking about their vertical devices that they will put in the road. The car hits them, it blows them away, but it does give direction to move over. I've seen them in different locations. They didn't
It's like a little flag, right?
Yeah, it's not a flag per se, but it stands up. It's got a
Springing at the base.
yes. Mhm.
Flexible ballards.
I'll check with.
Yeah.
I'll check with Patrick on that. I didn't know that was planned to go in down there. I thought we were going to do it with paint, but I'll get with him this week.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Fischescher? Thank you, Mr. Fischescher. Service Chairman, Mr. Albrink.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a reminder, especially since the grass at this time of the year is really growing at a rapid pace. Just want to remind the residents to not place the grass clippings in the gutter or in the sewers. If you do that, then we get our storms or our sewers clogged up, and that causes problems if we get some big rain. So we do this every year. We ask people to do this every year. So just don't sweep them back on your own property or bag them up or whatever. So, and that's all that I have this evening.
Okay, Mr. Albrecht, thank you. And last but very not least, Recreation Chairman, Mr. Lynn.
Thank you very much. I do want to report that due to the current COVID-19 restrictions in place regarding large groups and pools, we decided to temporarily halt the pool signups and opening of the pool. We want to open the pool for the community, and we understand we want them all to enjoy it and to continue to, and we will continue to monitor the situation. So if it's possible, we will try to open later in the summer, and we will reevaluate the amount of money we should charge for people to come to the pool, depending on when we can open it. So I just want to let everybody know that right now we have the signups aren't happening, and the pool opening has been halted, and that's not on any date scheduled at this time. But we're monitoring the situation with hopes that it can be open later in the summer. I also wanted to talk about that several times the police have been called down to basically the football field because groups of people have been working out on the field. It's important to know that I know it's a community field, but we can't gather in large groups. We can't work out in large groups. So if they see that, the police can be called. They'll ask you to leave. If you don't, you can be fined. So again, just be careful on large group gatherings and any public parks and everybody together. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Any other business before I go to the administration? Any council member business? Then we will go to reports of officials, and we will start with Law Director, Mr. Stevenson.
To reopen the mayor's court as originally scheduled on May the 19th. We are going to start with traffic and criminal arraignments. We're not going to have any tax cases on that day. The tax cases will be reset until the June tax date. The plan right now is to hold the court down at Hayfie Fieldhouse because it has there's more room down there to distance each one from the other, and we think it gives us a better opportunity to get through the court in an expeditious fashion by doing it down there. There are some bugs that we're going to have to work out with respect to the facilities. But right now, the current plan is to again start with the traffic and criminal arraignments on May the 19th. The tax cases will be moved until June, and the dates will be posted on the website for the city. Because of the delay in getting these things done, everything's kind of been on hold since the middle of March. We are planning on putting a couple extra court dates in June and July to take care of the overflow, so we don't end up with 1,000 cases every court. We've got close to 900 scheduled for the 19th, which is why we are going to split the tax cases off. So right now that's our plan. We should have the information on the website by the end of the week, and we'll see how it works out.
Any other questions for Mr. Stevenson? No? Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Go to the treasurer, Mr. Gertz.
Thank you, Chris. I did send a copy of the April income tax receipts to everyone on Sunday evening via email. So hopefully you've had a chance to review that, but I will provide a summary here. And then I've got some comments after the summary. For the individual residence income taxes, we collected $109,428, which was $307,421 less than what we took in last April. But as Mr. Gertz indicated, the tax date has been pushed. The final collections date has been pushed, or filing date, I should say, has been pushed to July 15th. So our hope for the individual residence income taxes, our hope is that we should be able to make up the majority of that $307,000 because people are just filing late. So hopefully we'll be able to catch up. It'll take a few months, but that's our goal. In total, year to date for individual residence income taxes, we've collected $377,963. So based on what happened in April, we're running about $320,561 behind where we were at this point last year. For business profit income taxes, we collected $26,014 versus almost $145,000 last April. So we're about $119,000 behind for the month of April. And again, our feeling is that we will be able to collect this business profit income tax as time goes forward here. But year to date, we've collected $144,413, but we are running about $97,000 behind. So we were a tad ahead, but our hope is that we can get that caught up as well. The big one, payroll withholding income taxes, we collected $590,089 versus $718,041 last April. So we're still about $128,000 behind. That one we're not real sure about because even though most of the businesses in Reading have the large businesses, you know, I was doing some analysis on our top 20 largest businesses, and we've reached out to them. Patrick has, our economic development director has, and some of them have, you know, furloughed some people, laid some people off. So we're not sure we're going to be able to make, I mean, hopefully they'll be bringing those people back as soon as all this coronavirus dies down, but we're not sure we're going to be able to make up that payroll withholding tax just because everybody is furloughed or laid off. Not everybody, but a number of people. We were really, to be honest with you, we were very pleased that as many of our large businesses were able to maintain their employment as compared to a lot of things you hear on the news and with the city of Cincinnati and, you know, other large communities. So that's the payroll withholding income taxes. So in total, we took in $725,531 for the month, which was $554,336 less than last April. And then year to date, we've taken in $2,602,672. So that was $432,000, almost $433,000 less than what we were, where we were year to date last April. Now, we were running a little bit ahead prior to April. The first quarter of the year wasn't too bad for us. So we're hoping that between the individual residence income tax filing deadline in July and the business profit income taxes that we hope to catch up on, hopefully by the end of July, we're going to be able to almost break even, or we should be about even as to where we were last year at that time. That's our hope. And as Mr. Gertz indicated earlier, And you all know that we passed that ordinance or resolution. So in the event we would need to additional funding, and Sabrina can talk more about this as well, we can begin exploring the getting a line of credit for X amount of dollars to help us, depending on how long this whole pandemic continues. So that's the kind of the long and short of the where we are from an income tax perspective at this juncture. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Well, that MSD, 105,000 from MFD and another $205,000 from the workers' comp fund. Plus, you know, I don't think we would take all the money out of the stadium fund, but maybe 100,000. It's kind of fortuitous that we have those things now.
Yeah, it's we're lucky that we've got those things, but a lot of people don't realize that when you look at the city of Reading, if you look at our average monthly payroll, it's roughly around $500,000 a month. And if we've got 3 payrolls in a given month, it's over 600,000. So, you know, within 1 month, that's a big chunk of our budget, $500,000 to $600,000. So, but you're exactly right, Don. We're very fortunate that we were able to get those additional funds in to help. And then we look at what we've got in other funds, and then we can, and Sabrina can talk more to this too. Hopefully we're trying to keep things balanced. We don't want to go out and get a line of credit. We don't want to go out and get a loan. We're hoping that this thing begins to end and we can hold our own and, you know, pick up on the collections as we move into July. So, but we are very fortunate that we got that, you know, extra 300,000 or so. That was great news.
Okay, any other comments? Thank you, Mr. Gertz. And last, Auditor, Ms. Smith. I think you're on mute, Sabrina.
Still?
Oh, you're there now.
Okay. Okay, perfect. I think everybody's kind of talked about a few things that I wanted to touch base on. May is a 3 pay period month, which we've all been talking about, but the last pay was actually, the check was done within April. So when we talk about these things, it's very important to understand, you know, the give and flow of the year. And I think Mel is right, and as well as Tony's on the meetings, as well as Patrick, as well as the tax office people are in there too with us when we meet, that we all stay on board. So, you know, right now in the general fund, we have 708,000 going into May. And then also the city earnings tax, we have 114,000. As people have commented, the checks that have come in for the workers' comp of over 200,000, that, you know, kind of contains a payroll for us, as well as the MSD money would be half a payroll for us. But I think our constant communication with our department heads, you know, talking about expenditures, talking about things that we can do to use a little more sweat equity, the purchasing power, and how we can kind of keep those things in check to, you know, kind of really keep our real resources, which are our people and the people that kind of run our different departments. So I think everybody's on board to do that right now. And as we talked about, you know, that legislation that was passed for, you know, Mel, Patrick, and myself to kind of go out and be able to obtain items for a line of credit, you know, thinking about this year, July 15th is going to be a big day for us, but also the end of the year is going to kind of tell us a lot more. So I think just all talking from, you know, the expenses side, the income side, and everything else, I think it's just going to be really important to keep everybody on the same page, just because, you know, we're not even concerned fully about just this year. It's about next year as well. So I think we have a lot of different things that we're staying on top of to make sure we're monitoring and going forward and doing what's best, you know, for the citizens of Reading, as well as, you know, the employees of, you know, the city of Reading, and just kind of trickling that down throughout. So that's kind of my report for now. And then I have a couple updates for the end of the night, Chris. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you, Ms. Smith. Yes, go ahead.
Hey, just one other comment here. I did get a report from our office today in terms of where we're at the first 5 days of the month in May. And so far, as of close of business today, we have collected $46,500. So we're actually running about $7,500 ahead of where we normally are the first 5 days of May as compared to last year. So just keep your fingers crossed that that continues. And obviously, I'll keep you all posted on a weekly basis. So.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Want to go to any reading of any resolutions? No resolutions. We have one ordinance, which is a third reading.
I'd like to comment on before we go any
Go
further.
ahead, Mr. Gertz.
Yeah, this is an ordinance that I drafted. I'm not finding a lot of support because of the cost and so forth. About the cost so much, I guess, I'm assuming it's because people are concerned about the amount of money we're trying to curb and save money, and I don't disagree necessarily, although it's coming out of the stadium fund, which has another, even if we moved 100,000, we still have 11,000 in there. This ordinance doesn't mean we would spend $3,000. It's not to exceed that amount. And one of the main reasons I'm trying to get to this is I want to thank Don Lindeman. I did talk to him about, he's done a fine job on getting all the properties listed in the city and background on them, and he's done a lot of work. I think his grandson gave him a better idea than I had, and that is to put all of this on disc, and they could be available to be sold to people at a fair price, because it's a very valuable asset that the city now has acquired. But regardless, that particular documents that he has got, he got those to me, and I'm looking into it myself a bit as to the title that goes back to 1948. I know it was brought up that the Kiwanis had the property. They had I think they had a right to acquire a contract, or had a contractor right to acquire property, but it lasted only a week or so. And that was assigned to the city. And it's been basically the city's ever since. And I think it's important to find out what that property has as a value. And secondly, and probably just as important, is to find out the background on it. What are the conditions? What are the restrictions? What are the protective covenants? Do all of these things exist, or don't they exist? There's been a lot of discussion over the years. Many people have many opinions about what should be done with the property, whether it be given away, sold, used for whatever purposes. That hasn't come about. And what's interesting to me, it has come about in the last week, though, is, which is kind of sad, frankly, is the destruction and demolition of the central school. And when that property is completely leveled and put to a state for a possible future use, as I mentioned before, one of the reasons I'm pushing this is I'd like to know more in detail and start getting more input from the citizens about how that's going to be used. And it's going to be owned by the school. I know some say that doesn't belong. I think it was said about the stadium, it doesn't belong to the city, it belongs to the citizens. Well, I guess that can be stretched to any other properties that are owned by a political entity in the city. So I want to know what's going to happen to that central school property, as well as the Hilltop property. And until we know what these values are, and we don't have any right to necessarily at this time appraise Central or Hilltop school property, but I think it would behoove us to know what the stadium property itself is worth, because I don't know, maybe we could do a swap. We could do something to make use, because I like to make sure that the city has a say in how this property, right now it's for school use. But we already have one controversy going on at the Hilltop, or at the high school and the school itself, K through 12, as to the PDD that occurred up there. And it worries me that we could run into a similar problem, but this one's in 2nd Ward, which is my ward. I don't want to see something happen to that property that would be not a valuable use and a proper use. I don't want to see something that would not be conducive to the people that live in the neighborhood, as well as the whole ward. So that's one of the reasons why I'm promoting this. People don't know, but there's the Hilltop property in the school. It's my understanding they're sitting on about $950,000 that relates to that property, and it's in the bank. And I'd like to know more about that if we're going to get into a discussion. I know they're planning to put a baseball diamond and some other kind of athletic or whatever, some kind of an athletic facility there. But until we know where we stand with some of these and what our rights are as to the property that the city has title to it, I think we would be foolish. And I don't know that we can't find $3,000 even in these difficult times. In our discussion, it was just kicked around by Mel and Sabrina. Nobody brought up again the sewer service fee fund. There's $562,000 in that fund. That's unencumbered to my knowledge, can be used for any use. So that's my pitch on that ordinance. And that's all I, at this point in time, like to say, but I do hope that the rest council members will give it some consideration. We can go forward from there.
Mr. Gertz, would you consider tabling it for the time being rather than they have a vote on it tonight?
No, Don, I think go or not go with it. Vote it down if you want to vote it down, or don't pass it. That'll be tabled automatically if they vote it down. I mean, we can always come back. I'm going to thank you again for providing me with all that data, and I will talk to Joe Allig a bit about it. I haven't, he wanted information before he would ever proceed as to exploring this. One of the ironies of the property at the stadium, as a title examiner a few years back, 50 years ago, I was the title examiner for Ohio Title Corporation. And boy, when you got a title that only had one grantee back to 1948, that was a beautiful title to run because you didn't have to go very far. You only looked at one title because the Marketable Title Act's 40 years. And we used to go back 65 years back in those days. So looking at the actual title to the property, it appeared to me on the documents that you provided to me that the property was acquired in 1948 by the city. Later on, they got a waiver on some of the protective covenants that actually the corporation that owned the fireworks property. But then in 51, we had the Centennial, and there were profits made from the Centennial. And I'm curious, they call it Centennial Park. And I think that the profits from that went into the use. And then in the 60s, the city paid about $600,000, if I recall, to build the structure that's there for not only the stands, but the garages, the showers, the locker rooms, concession stands. So, you know, the city has quite a bit of an investment there. And I think it would be valuable to find out and keep kicking the can down the road, but I don't think $3,000. As I said with the volleyball matters that Sabrina was looking at back a few years ago, finally, I mean, I'll go to the bank and take out a loan and advance it to the city. You can pay me back in a year or so. How's that? I don't think that'll sell with it.
Besides the title, you used to be a used cars salesman too, or what?
My brother was. He was an excellent used car salesman. He sold new cars, used cars. And he managed what is today McCluskey's back when it was King Chevrolet. Yes, there's nothing wrong with car salespeople. My dad was a car salesman. He owned a Chrysler Plymouth, so don't try to knock car sales.
I'm not trying to knock him. I'm saying you were doing a good job.
Okay, thanks.
We will go ahead and have the reading of that ordinance then.
An ordinance directing the employment of Deerdorf Appraisal Service to conduct an appropriate appraisal for the City of Reading Veterans Memorial Stadium located in the City of Reading, and further to employ Joseph W. Allig, attorney at law, to conduct a thorough title examination of the property located on West Street in the City of Reading and declaring an emergency.
I'll make a motion to adopt that ordinance.
Do I hear a second?
Sure, it's a second. At least it deserves a vote.
Well, thank you, Donald.
Motion made by Mr. Gertz, second by Mr. Lindeman to adopt the ordinance for the title search. Roll call.
Mr. Powell,
No.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes.
Mr. Lynn,
No.
Mr. Albrecht,
No.
Mr. Lindeman,
No,
Mr. Fischescher,
No.
Mrs. Edichico.
No.
Okay, then that ordinance failed. And
So I got to pick up three other votes somewhere, huh?
Yeah, there's an election coming up.
That's a good one.
Other business. I think someone, Mrs. Sabrina, had mentioned there was other business.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I had a couple of updates. I just wanted to echo what Randy said about the blood drive. Jenny Morgan helped organize this, and that's been great. And it'll be at Reading High School, and it's going to be on May 21st. If anybody has problems signing up or calling Hawksworth, you can also give me a call at 513-733-4879. Again, that's for the blood drive on May 21st. And then I also wanted to let everybody know that the farmers market will be back starting May 29th from 4 to 7 p.m. at the corner of Vine and Reading Road. That'll be the farmers market starting back up on May 29th from 4 to 7 p.m. And those are all my updates. Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome. Any other business?
One other thing briefly, Chris.
Pardon me. Go ahead, Mr. Powell.
Speaking of the local government fund, I know we passed a resolution several weeks ago, but given the governor's press conference today, I would not hold our breath as far as any local government funds being restored.
Okay. And Mr. Lindeman.
I just wanted to thank Chief Owens and Patrick and the property manager. They did a good service. Yeah.
Mr. Martin.
I'm sorry. They did a good service for one of our citizens up there on Thorn Ridge, and I appreciate that. Actually, he gave me a call tonight to express his appreciation too. So appreciate their help.
Okay. Any other business from anyone? Ms. Adespino.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question real quick. A couple weeks ago, there was a fire on Pearl Street in a house that several people had told me was vacant and actually had squatters living in it that were a nuisance to the area. I guess there was a whole bunch of stolen bikes they found and a whole lot of problems. But that seems to be a big issue that I've heard from a lot of people is like the vacant and the blighted properties. So I was wondering if we had anything in place of what to do to condemn or to take care of those type of properties, if anybody knows, or if that's a question for Patrick.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to take up with Patrick. I know that we've bought properties when they're available to us. I'm not sure that's the right timing for that right now, but yeah.
Right.
Ms. Adechico, I think that probably the fire chief, he's done an excellent job, Chief Owens, on going in on properties that have fallen into state of condemnation. And if this fire has caused this property to be placed in that state, I'm very confident that he is currently investigating that. If not, I'm sure he'll probably find out through this meeting. But I agree that needs to be addressed. And if the property is depressed, then such a state that it can't be restored, then it should be condemned. And there are procedures where that can be taken down. I had a couple of things when you get time.
And Ms. Adechico, you were talking about more than just one piece of property, right?
Right. I know of a few that I've had people contact me about. I know there's one on 3rd Street that is owned by the Metropolitan Housing Authority, and supposedly they've condemned the property, but we haven't. So I don't know. So I was wondering if there's like a process that we need to follow, or if there's something residents can do to kind of get the ball rolling. Or
I think you could probably talk to Todd, because it's my understanding that process takes about 3 years. Not good.
And he'll be right in the middle of that process. Mr. Gertz.
Just a couple of things. I was curious that Mr. Lynn brought up about the swimming pool, and I agree we need to protect it, but it was ironic what I've been reading. I think people should get outdoors, not have crowds larger than whatever it is, 10 people, but the coronavirus is destroyed within 30 seconds if you're out in the sun and taking a walk and doing things. So sometimes I'm afraid people are under the assumption they should stay absolutely indoors. I would hope they'd investigate that. Secondly, I was watching a video, many of you have seen, it kind of concerned me, and I don't know whether it's been put out anywhere else. But I guess it's accurate, but hand sanitizer is about 60% alcohol. And they showed a I don't know, it was YouTube or something. Can't sleep at night once in a while, so I watch this crazy stuff. But they took hand sanitizer and put it in a dish and set it on fire. It doesn't even look like it was on fire. Used a tissue that showed it was burning. Even put water with it, and it was still burning. So people putting an over amount of sanitizer on their hands and are cooking around an open flame are going to have their hands catch on fire, is what the lead of it was. So I maybe safety department through a committee could look into it and see if that's accurate, Randy, but it would concern me, and I thought the citizens ought to be aware of it. And thirdly, I don't know when or how, but I enjoy watching you all on television. You certainly look good, but I'd rather be at the meeting at the council chambers. And it would seem to me that if we're going to open up court, we couldn't pursue more aggressively, open up our council meetings. And if we have to sit farther apart, that's fine with me, but I would rather have it where citizens can come if they choose, and we can separate them and they can speak and participate in the meetings like in the past. So those are the only things I had concerning extra materials. Thanks.
Okay. Well, we can discuss that that last item.
Chris?
When the state makes more things open, but go ahead, Mr. Fischescher.
Yeah, Tony, just to answer your question a little bit, there's a lot of alcohol involved with hand sanitizers. And, alcohol and water don't mix.
Right.
And so, they're right to a degree that's, that is a concern. I think a lot of people get carried away with it personally.
Exactly.
It's the fumes that catch fire, not the alcohol itself. And if you just have it on your hands, it's not going to be.
It's the vapors, not the.
It's the vapor, and if your hands are that wet, then I suggest use a paper towel or something. So, but
You're trying to be cautious.
I hear you. I mean, it's those kind of things that make people turn and say, before I do this, should I think a little bit more? That's good. Well, without any other.
One other.
Go ahead, Mr. Lindeman.
I believe it was brought up last week, and I'm not sure that we had an answer for it. The Memorial Day Parade, BYO Festival, American Legion Festival. It's my understanding that none of those things are going to happen. Does anybody have any information on that for sure?
BYO and the parade are done.
Yeah, they're both canceled this year. In fact, we're selling T-shirts on Facebook for BYO to raise money, and so far we've raised $800. Trying to get to 1,000. Rick Baskey, I think everybody here knows him, is making them, and he's going to send them up here, and then we'll distribute them. And we also set it up where people can drop off donations at Valley Central and let them know that it's for BYO. So we kind of figured out what we would spend at the festival and took that to the bank for them, and kind of encouraging everybody else to do that too, to keep it going.
Okay, that's very good. All right, with that, then I am going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. This meeting's adjourned.
Happy Cinco de Mayo.
Yep. See you in 2
Right.
weeks.
That's right.
2 weeks.
Just to remind, no meeting next week.
Correct.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
You
Chris.
too.
Good night.
Everybody.
Have a good night.